Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. Tony's out today, so that means no Mr. I-95.
I'm Frank Isola, Mr. Fill-In I-95.
Oh, yeah,
that
I
work?
forgot. You guys are like too deep. You're too deep
New
at
York,
least.
New York is where I-95 kind of starts, Mike, and finishes, right at the George Washington Bridge. There's nothing north, really.
Yeah, well, you know, I live about 9/10 of a mile off of it myself. Welcome to PTI. Tony has the day off, so I'm joined by our great friend, the always Frank Isola.
I-95. Not fans of I-95.
Memorial Day hangover salute,
Wow.
I'd say. I think I'd say that. Let's start today with the Celtics advancing to the NBA Finals. Boston swept Indiana before a third time in the series, found themselves trailing in the fourth. The Celtics finally retook the lead on that Derek White three with 41 seconds left, won by 3. The Pacers led most of the way without Tyrese Halliburton again, Frank. So, did you see this series as a legit test of the Celtics?
I know everyone's going to talk about the Halliburton injury the last 2 games, but here's the thing with the Celtics, Mike. Great team, and everyone said, how will they perform in close games? And that was the one area they struggled in. So, clutch wins, final 5 minutes, game within 5 points, they're 4-0 in the playoffs. No other team is undefeated. So for me, they took a big step against the Indiana Pacers. The fact Drew Holiday seems like you could tell he's going to make an impact on both ends of the court. But how about Jaylen Brown? The shot that he had in game 1 to tie it up, let's face it, that's the series essentially right there. And then I love what he did last night. Instead of forcing a shot, he found Derek White for a better shot. So I think Boston right now, they're 12-2 in the playoffs. If you go back to last year, the conference finals, they've won their last 8 road games in the playoffs, which is hard to do. Right now, I don't care who comes out of the West, they're the team to beat.
Frank, I'm going to go the other way on this. And I agree with every individual case you mentioned. I mean, Drew Holiday, what he did in each game late in the game, what the Celtics did late in the game, period, was superior. Jason Tatum averaging, what is it, 30 and 10 essentially, or 26 and 10. Nobody's done like 26, 10, and 5 since Bird in the Celtics franchise. All true. Jaylen Brown, clutch, timely, all of that is the case. And yet, the Pacers don't know what they're doing yet. They're a neophyte team in the best of circumstances, and they don't have the best of circumstances because they're missing their best player, Tyrese Halliburton. In the previous series, no, it's not Boston's fault, but they're playing against a shorthanded Cleveland team. Looks like the Celtics are on the power play the whole series, and yet they coughed up a game and nearly gave up another. And in the first series, same thing with Miami. No, it's not a test. Dallas is going to be a test. A real test. And if I had to pick today, based on what I've seen from Dallas so far in these playoffs and the Celtics so far in these playoffs, I'm taking Dallas. And I agree. Look, there's nothing the Celtics could do about this. But they weren't convincing enough against the Pacers, Frank. The Pacers could be up 3-1 in this series. The Celtics, I'm not going to say they were impressive. They didn't impress me.
All right, it doesn't matter, though. They shouldn't have to apologize for a sweep. And this goes back to the regular season.
They shouldn't.
They won 64 games during the regular season. So with the number 1 seed, sometimes you get advantages. Now, those advantages turn out to be players being hurt. But I like the fact that this was a team that took the regular season seriously. And the one thing they were criticized about, Mike, was how they played in crunch time. They had a brutal loss at Cleveland when they blew a lead during the regular season, one at Atlanta. And then you see what they did here. How about last night? But forget about offensively. They held Indiana to without a point in the last 3:33 of this game.
Who's Indiana
so they're getting it done on both.
Indiana's best player's not there.
They got somebody who got them the lead. I can't kill Boston, and I can't. By the way, Jaylen Brown, to me, grew up a lot in this series.
Jaylen Brown,
he had the big shot in game 1.
Not everybody didn't vote for
2.
Jaylen Brown. I voted for Jaylen Brown, second team All-NBA. Real quick, because we got to go to next door. Frank, more than one thing can be true. The Celtics have done exactly what they're supposed to do.
Exactly, 12-2.
Is that enough to win the championship and beat Dallas in the next round? I don't think it is.
By the way, he was upset about all defense, and I looked at the voting. 3 people voted for him. I was one of them, so he's got a big problem with you. Let's get that on the record. All right, well, you're not giving Minnesota any chance, but the Timberwolves could follow the Pacers out of the playoffs tonight. The Mavericks, they're up 3-0 and playing at home, but Dallas rookie center Derek Lively is doubtful with a sprained neck. Mike, let's play a little odds makers here. What are the chances the Wolves win tonight and get the Western Conference Finals back to Minnesota?
30%. They, too, like the Pacers, it's not like they've looked bad during these games. It's
only
closing. It's the end of it, not knowing what to do. And I just think that is the case with both those franchises. The similarity in these series are not just, 7 games won by one team, the sweep already and 3-0 lead. It's that Minnesota and the Pacers, the T-Wolves and the Pacers, they don't know enough yet to close. I think they can get better. I don't like the handling of sort of Karl Anthony Towns to bench him for 9 minutes one night and expect that he's going to shoot the ball confidently the next in game 3. Karl Anthony Towns and his makeup and whether he's perhaps a sensitive person or not, but he's important. You can't win without him. And so now they're going to get that fixed. Are they going to get that solved tonight in time to beat Dallas when Dallas is smelling it and Kyrie and Luka know they can throw the hammer down? No, 30%, which I think is a generous chance I'm giving Minnesota.
Yeah, I give them a puncher's chance. I don't care who wins the series. I want Minnesota to win tonight because we definitely need games, especially with the Boston series over. But I understand with Minnesota, Rudy Gobert, he's the NBA pinata. Everything is his fault. But if you look at the star players on both teams, Luka and Kyrie are averaging 60 points, a combined 60 points in the series. Meanwhile, Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards are at 37 points per game. And, Karl Anthony Towns is 3 for 22 on threes, 0 for 8 the last game. And Anthony Edwards, where was he the last 5 minutes of the game? And it wasn't just not making plays offensively. Defensively, he lacks energy. The head coach, Chris Finch, talked about it.
Lost.
And Minnesota, and they talk a lot. And I love Anthony Edwards. I know you love him too. But you can't be sitting there telling me, I still don't think they could beat us. Ant-Man, they've already won 3 games. How much more do they need to prove that they can beat you? So I believe Minnesota does have a chance because I think Anthony Edwards needs to have a big-time game. I think they can get the series back to Minnesota. Remember something about Lively. 4th in the NBA at a plus-minus. He's a plus 109, and he's a backup.
And
so if they don't have him tonight, that's big.
By the way, one last note. Yeah, I agree with you completely about Ant-Man, but Karl Anthony Towns, they got to figure out. They should have spent the last, 36 hours pumping him up, trying to get the guy who played so well for Minnesota all season. They need that guy tonight. Let's move to the French Open and Australian Max Purcell going out in 5 sets despite having 6 match points. 6. The 5th one is getting the most attention because Purcell served it underhand. And Henri Squire chased it down and won the point. After the match, Purcell defended his tactics saying, quote, I do it a lot in practice. Hindsight's a bleep thing. There's no wrong decision. It's just the way the cookie crumbles, close quote. What? Frank, you agree with that?
Rafa stole the spotlight yesterday because it could be his final match ever at the French Open. But this was crazy. And come on, Mike, that is so weak. First of all, you're playing a guy in Squire who attended Wake Forest, by the way. He's a German who attended Wake Forest, who's never been ranked in the top 200. And you're really going to quick serve him at 6-5 in the 5th set on match point? Come on, I'm glad he lost that. And by the way, after he lost that point, he was so rattled, double faults. Then he loses the game on a backhand that he hits wide. He deserved to lose that for doing it. That is weak. Look at, when you watch the replay, the ball girl isn't even set, and he's already serving. There is a precedent here, though. Michael Chang did this to Yvonne Lendl. I remember this like it was yesterday. 1989, in the 4th round, Michael Chang was all cramped up, so he couldn't even move. So he was serving underhand, but he was not quick serving. There's a big difference. And by the way, Chang went on to win the whole tournament.
He was trying to stay alive, Frank. I remember that, too. But let me just say this. When you are basically, he had no more confidence in his serve. He had already lost several match points. And so at that point, he's desperate. And he's trying something. It is a tactic. And I don't want to hear about practice. He's doing it because he's not confident. We talked about Karl Anthony Towns not being confident in his shot, and you got to take the next one. This guy decides, I got to go to something else here because he knew he double faulted right after that. He didn't have any confidence in his serve. So desperation leads you to do things, even in sort of a competitive battle, which are just failed. It's bad judgment.
Mike,
that's what it is.
Mike.
And it was, I would have freaked out if I was in person sitting there and watched him go to the underhand serve.
Mike, if I came over to your fancy country club and you and I played tennis and I quick serve you, you know what you would do? You take your racket, you put it in your bag, and you drop. Thank you. What's happening in a major tournament?
I would say,
quick
can
serving at match
somebody
point?
escort Mr. Isola to his car, please?
They'll probably tell me my shirt's out. I'm not allowed to be there anywhere.
Let's take a break. Coming up, the Oilers go up early, then they fall apart. We're going to ask PK Subban why.
Yeah, we'll also ask him whether Jacob Trouba should have been suspended instead of fined for this elbow. That was a nasty hit.
I played a lot of tennis in my life, 30 years worth. I don't know that I ever quick served anybody but my brother, because I would do anything to beat him even now. Let's dig deeper into the Stanley Cup playoffs with a fabulous ESPN analyst, PK Subban. PK, we appreciate you joining us. And we're going to start with the Stars coming back to beat the Oilers in Edmonton last night. The Oilers are up 2-0, and they say they took their feet off the gas. PK, is that what you saw, and why would that happen?
Yeah, I did see that. It doesn't really make sense to me. I don't know what was said during the first intermission, but, you know, if you're the Edmonton Oilers, you got to know coming into this series that every shift is going to matter against the Dallas Stars. They have such a deep team, and when you take into consideration they got some players back, which we could talk about, I'm sure, in this segment, you know, their team got deeper when it came to last night's game. So for the Edmonton Oilers, there's no excuse. You got to keep your foot on the gas. The Dallas Stars have 4 lines. They roll them, but you can't. That's the way the playoffs are played right now, the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. It's every game is tight. You can't afford to take your foot off the gas. Dallas came out and outshot them 2-1. That can't happen in your building.
All right, PK, you talked about players returning. Rope Hintz, he returned to the ice for the Stars last night. You know, we don't talk a lot about him. What does he do to change Dallas?
Oh, man, he's such an important part of this team. When you talk about depth, it's down the middle. This guy's big, strong, fast, and skilled. And then you take into consideration the chemistry that he's got with a young Jason Robertson, who's amongst that young core of great players in Dallas, along with Stan Coven and Steele and Wyatt Johnson, who had a huge goal also last night. He was hugely impactful last night in the game. You could see it with just his size. And he even said it in his interview. They wanted to get heavier on the Edmonton Oilers, and they did. They got in heavy on the forecheck. They put the pressure on. They rolled 4 lines. They got their game going. And when the Dallas Stars get their game going, there's very few teams, if any, that can handle them in this league. So Rope Hint's a big part of that. He's got to stay healthy because we see what the Dallas Stars are like when he is.
All right, let's go over to the East. And the Rangers, they're living on the edge, but they are up 2-1 in this series. Game 4 tonight in Florida. Jacob Trouba was fined, not suspended for that elbow. Now, I'm going to use pause for dramatic effect. You were known as a physical player. Do you have a problem with that at all, that he wasn't suspended?
I'm not sure it warranted a suspension. Usually for a suspension to happen, if it's me, I got to see somebody get seriously hurt. Nobody was seriously hurt. Thank God, Evan Rodriguez was able to come back into the game. But for me, it should have been a major. There's no doubt. I mean, this isn't a hockey play. I even go back to the Carolina series when Jacob Trouba launched himself at Natchez and hit the glass. You know, I said I loved everything about it. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the way he plays and the physicality that he brings because I used to do it. He hits a little bit differently. And if you're going to hit forward like that, your elbow comes up. You hit somebody, I got to call it. And I'm not playing favorites this time of the year. As much as I picked the Rangers to win in 7, I got to call it the way I see it. I thought it should have been a major. It wasn't, but you got to play on. This is the playoffs. You don't have time to dwell on non-calls. You know, it seems like every team is missing a call from here to there. You got to play through it. This is a big game tonight for them. They got to get over that.
Speaking of PK, and we know you got a big game to get ready for, so we're going to let you go after this. Shesterkin gives up 4 goals the other night, yet his own teammates and everybody else seems to be heavily crediting him for the Rangers' overtime win. I'm sorry. It seems like, he let a couple in. I know there was a couple of funky goals, but does he really deserve that much credit for that win?
Well, I'm going to quote Wayne Gretzky for a second, who I've had the opportunity to speak to on many occasions about his days in Edmonton. And he still considers Grant Fuhr to maybe be the best goaltender of all time, not because he made every save, because he made the saves when he needed to. As a goaltender in the Stanley Cup playoffs, you got to shut the door when you have to. You look at Tim Thomas when Boston won the Cup. He's got an unorthodox style. He let in some soft ones, but when he had to stop the puck, when he had to shut the door, he did. Igor Shesterkin is doing everything right now. And, credit to him, the Florida Panthers, I think it was 108 shot attempts last game, Mike. Like, come on. Wilbon, you throw 108 shot attempts, a couple of those are going to go in. So you got to give him credit for shutting the door when he had to. He's been doing it all series. My question is he going to be able to keep up that level of play? Is he going to get tired and worn down? That's the question. So the New York Rangers got to tighten up things defensively and not put so much pressure on him. But he's a Conn Smythe front runner for me. New York Rangers win the Stanley Cup. It's going to be because of him. He's a big part of it.
All right, I am not pushing back on you and not pushing back on the great one. I'm not that crazy. PK, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate having you.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Wilbon. Thanks, guys.
Rangers, Panthers take the ice at 8 Eastern tonight on ESPN. Let's take one last break, but still to come. Baseball players no longer have Angel Hernandez to complain about.
And after struggling to start the season, the late signing Blake Snell says he needed spring training.
Look, PK knows he's forgotten more about hockey than I'll ever know in 8 lifetimes. And then when he goes to Gretzky, that's the idea. That's game over. There's no pushback.
Rente.
Time to get happy, people. Happy 36th birthday, Craig Kimbrell. The 9-time All-Star closer built his rep with the Braves and Red Sox, but has floated to 5 different teams the past 5 seasons. The Orioles are the latest. Kimbrell has 12 saves this season, but briefly lost his closer role a couple of weeks ago while struggling and battling a back issue. Since returning to the role, Kimbrell has 4 saves without allowing a run. Overall, he's tied with Boston's Kenley Jansen for 5th on the all-time saves list with 429, but still would need 224 more to pass the great Mariano Rivera, and who, of course, is the all-time leader.
Well, that's not going to happen, but he could pass Francisco Rodriguez. So you said Kimbrell's at 429, K-Rod is at 437, and your guy Lee Smith at 478, 3rd all-time.
Man,
not
Lee Smith,
impossible.
Forgotten, it's been a long time. Good for him.
Yeah.
A not-so-happy anniversary, Jamie Moyer. Around this day, 12 years ago, you made what turned out to be the last start of your 25-year Major League career. Pitching for the Rockies, the lefty gave up 4 home runs to the Reds, the most notable of which was to Todd Frazier, who actually lost his bat mid-swing. This loss came just over a month after Moyer became the oldest pitcher to ever win a Major League game at 49 years, 150 days, a record that still stands. The oldest big league player today is 41-year-old Justin Verlander. Frank, in all, Moyer won 269 games. That's insane. 197 of those after he turned 34.
Yeah, terrific career, brutal ending. You know, he did win a World Series with his hometown Philadelphia Phillies, and after they won, the players dug up the pitching rubber and they gave it to Jamie Moyer, who said he was at the parade when the Phillies won in 1980. So at least there was something.
He and Greg Maddux
nice that we could
were
say.
once both on the Cubs staff. That's like 8,000 wins, and then they did their best work elsewhere in most cases. Happy trails, Angel Hernandez. The 62-year-old umpire is retiring after a 33-season career, effective immediately. The Athletic is reporting that MLB approached Hernandez about retiring after this season, earlier this season, and the two sides have reached a financial settlement. Hernandez has long been the subject of complaints from players and ridicule from fans based on some of his occasionally perplexing calls. All balls and strikes could soon be called by an automated system that's already in the minors and could be in the majors by 2026. I don't know how I feel about that.
You know, he missed a lot of last season because he had a back injury. Let me ask you this. Do you think, with all the emphasis and the focus on gambling, the complaints from not just players but gamblers, maybe that had a little bit to do with it, where MLB said, you know what, maybe now is the perfect time to just get out?
Yeah. No errors today. We got to run through the big finish because we're running out of show, Frank. Shohei throwing up to 80 miles an hour from 60 feet. Is that significant?
No, because the way he's hitting, he's not going to pitch this year. We'll worry about that next year. The Cubs lost to the Brewers and Craig Counsell's return to Milwaukee. Your thoughts?
I don't care about Counsell's return. I care that the Cubs are in a total free fall. Giant starter Blake Snell says he now realizes he needed spring training. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's kind of important. He's pitched better, but he's still 0-3 with a 10.42 ERA. Ridiculous. Ooh. Lexi Thompson will retire from golf at the end of the season. Are you surprised?
She's just 29, 15-time winner in a major, youngest to ever qualify for the U.S. Women's Open. She was 12. Last one, WNBA tonight includes Mercury Sun, Sparks Fever, Storm Sky. Most interesting matchup.
Caitlin Clark against Cameron Brink, 1 versus 2, and that's the one game that the Fever won. They beat the Sparks out in L.A. We're out of time. Thanks for watching. I'm Frank Isola.
I'm Mike Wilbon. Same time tomorrow, Knuckleheads. You can get the PTI podcast on the ESPN app or Apple Podcast. PTI. And now, Celtics, Mavericks, or Timberwolves?
I think this is an easy one. I think it's the Mavericks, really, because of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, the way that they've played. You know, Luka's just taken his game to another level. And if they could end their series pretty early here, that would give Luka a lot of time to rest, because we know he's got a knee issue that he's dealing with, an ankle as well. You know, what'll be a great storyline if it is Dallas is Kyrie going back to Boston. You know, Kyrie hasn't won a game since he stomped on Lucky a few years back with the Brooklyn Nets after a playoff game. And we know there's a lot of animosity there. Remember, Kyrie said he was going to retire as a member of the Boston Celtics. So the storylines are terrific. And Kyrie's the kind of guy, and we've seen it thus far in the playoffs. They have 2 closers on their team. Not a lot of basketball teams have that. So if Luka has it going like he did the other day, that's a big plus. And Kyrie will be difficult to stop if he's playing the way that he is. Let's face it, he looks happy, and he's been playing great.
It's Dallas for sure, and I don't think we're going to have to wonder much longer about who's going to be the Western Conference team facing the Celtics. I mean, you want to see Tatum and Brown tested as great as they are, and they've been to 1 finals. Luka hasn't been to 1 yet, and obviously Kyrie's been to multiples. He's playing with LeBron.
Yep. You
want that tag team matchup. As different as those duos are, Frank, I can't wait to see that. But let me just mention with the Mavericks. They've gotten this far, and they sort of supplemented their roster. Nico Harrison and then Jason Kidd implementing it, Nico Harrison making the acquisitions. To draft Lively is one thing. You start the season with that kid. But to then trade for Gafford and P.J. Washington and get them so integrated seamlessly, and for Luka and Kyrie to understand in such short order how those guys need to be deployed, it's really, really, really impressive. I know people are fixated on closing. I'm just amazed at how well those guys are all playing together. And now Dallas actually defends, which Frank, they weren't doing that in November, December. Kyrie said the other day, they got to the All-Star break, and he said, okay, how is this going to be sustainable? We got to play defense, and they are. So they're the matchup. And I'm going to tell you, right now, if you tell me that Porzingis, you don't know what you're going to get, he may be back in the lineup, but he hasn't played. All he's done is practice. I'm favoring Dallas. I never thought I'd say that, but that's where I would go so far.
And Porzingis is another storyline. He used to play for the Dallas Mavericks, of course,
with
Luka. One thing to remember about the Celtics, though, look at the way they are defensively. Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Jaylen Brown, that should have been on an all-defensive team. They can throw a lot of different bodies at both Luka and Kyrie.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's some trio of perimeter defenders. It is.
You're right. That's it. We're done. Back to you.